The haunting strains of a Greek folk tune played by a concert violinist brought back to Karin Bell tragic and frightening memories. Listening to the concert with her husband Walter in the darkness of the well-filled Clarendon University auditorium, she felt a sudden chill race through her. She glanced at the solemn, handsome profile of her dark-haired mate to see if he'd also been touched by the music. It seemed that he hadn't, at least not in the manner she had been, for he was merely listening in politely attentive fashion, like the rest of the audience. Karin frowned as she realized that Walter hadn't remembered. It was unlike him to forget anything so important. With a tiny sigh, she turned to watch the young violinist on stage as he continued with a different folk tune. Karin was suddenly seeing another young man standing there playing the violin, a young man with straw-colored hair, a pleasant face, and sad blue eyes. Peter Allison. How long had it been since she'd thought of him like this? She'd learned of Peter's death more than 2 years ago, just when she'd been preparing to return to Greece and marry him. His friend, Walter Bell, had come to her with the news, and he had remained to win her for himself. They'd been married now for more than a year. So far, she'd had no reason to regret her decision. Walter was a loving, considerate husband. He'd brought her to this college town in Vermont where he was a professor of modern literature. The position augmented his income as a writer of novels. But despite this new happiness that had come her way, she'd not been able to forget Peter, his wooing of her, and his tragic death at the hands of some unknown murderer. After she'd heard of his body being found sprawled on a cliff top, with his head bashed in so that his long, straw-colored hair had been stained by the red wine of his blood, she'd suffered from a long series of nightmares. In them, Peter always came stumbling towards her, his body held in an awkward straightness, his sad blue eyes unseeing, his lips moving soundlessly as he tried to tell her the name of his killer. She always awoke at this point with a scream. The violinist had ended the selection, and now he was taking bows as the audience applauded. Walter, his classically handsome face showing appreciation, clapped his hands enthusiastically. Then, noticing she was sitting there in a rather dazed state, he showed mild concern. "Didn't you enjoy the music?" he asked her. She gave him an uneasy glance. Yes, he's very good." "You weren't applauding." "No," she said. "I was lost in my thoughts for a moment. That Greek folk tune he played. The last time I heard it played on a violin was when Peter played it for me." "Really?" A cold note had come into her husband's voice and reminded her that he didn't like her talking about Peter. Not that he was jealous of the dead man whom she'd planned to marry, but merely that he felt it was morbid on her part and not good for her. The violinist began an encore, and so she was spared the embarrassment of continuing the discussion. But as she sat there, her interest wandered from the concert hall, and she was back with Peter Allison again. She imagined herself in the arms of the noted concert violinist whom she'd met in Athens and who had taken her to Delphi to see the villa where he was spending the summer with his writer friend, Walter Bell, and the charming young artist, Simon Ward. Peter and Walter were American expatriates living in Greece, and Simon was an Englishman. But all three had the same interests and got along well enough to happily share the white villa set on a green hill overlooking the Mediterranean. The violin music from the stage of the concert hall filled her ears, but she was seeing Peter playing for her as he stood on the patio of the villa. Her eyes blurred slightly with tears at the memory of the good days she'd known with Peter, and she realized the scar of that memory was still etched on her mind, and more sensitive than she'd bargained for. She loved her husband, but she was unable to forget Peter or the senseless violence which had taken his life.